I'd like, if I may, today to speak with you about psychological states and state management, and a little bit about maybe practicing that, and an area where I think it's quite fruitful to practice that, and also something to do with the semantics, the linguistics, if you like, of the way in which we can maintain and assist the facilitation of particular learning states which are fruitful to the coachee. So let's just start with psychological states. Most of us know what those are, that we have different states, psychological states, a different head, if you like, a different mindset for different periods of time, and in a coaching environment we will notice those states, and we'll notice when they're less or more useful to people. We can question and challenge. Occasionally we can move people from a particular place to somewhere else by inviting them to go to somewhere that is more resourceful. I mentioned in an earlier video about a week and a half ago, seeing an individual who was unresourceful, and one of the things I did with asked him to do was to invite him to find another space in the coaching room where he could move to, and that might be more resourceful, so that as he moved and when he moved, he would be able to leave behind the psychological state, the mindset, the head that he had in that particular place, and move to that place with more resources. And he did that. Different states for different things. Now, of course, some of that we do overtly, so it's obvious what we're doing. We're inviting someone to perhaps go through some sort of model or tool in order to explore with us a mechanism for their learning. And sometimes, of course, the coach can do that covertly. So one can match. For those of you with some neurolinguistic programming will have heard the sort of pace and lead expression, which is pacing, mirroring, reflecting the sort of state that the individual has, building the rapport with them from that level, and then moving on and moving the state, which might be a pause and followed by a little bit more energy in the voice, slight change in posture, and see whether they come with you. So there's two different ways of doing that, the covert and the overt ways of doing that. Psychological states important because we want people to move from calculating, logical, left brain type of thinking, and through our challenges we want them to be self-reflective and silent and experiencing their learning in whatever way they do that, which might be visual, could be auditory, it could be some sort of other experiential happening that's going on with them, some very powerful emotional state, for example, that happens in that reflective space. And we want to manage those. One of the great ways of practicing these with states is something quite simple, which again many of you will have heard of, which is the perceptual positions. So in this particular situation, if you're looking at me, from my perspective I'm in first position, from your perspective you're in first position, from your perspective I'm in the second position, and the camera, if you like, is watching. It's watching me anyway. So the camera is watching, and that's the sort of observer or third position. First, second over there with the other individual, my coachee or whoever that happens to be, and then an observer position as well. When we invite people to think about perhaps a conflict or a difficult situation, or the rehearsal of a particular situation that they might have, expect to have with a boss, let's say, that's likely up till this point to be seen as difficult, we can invite them to go into that relating again as if it was happening now, with or without a set of new resources. After coaching, chances are that we will have been able to assist them to get more psychological resources, to have a different experience to the one that they've had up until this point. So inviting someone to say, well, and to get some learning from being in the second position rather than the first can be very useful. Also to enable them to get a distance from a situation in which themselves and the other person are in that particular conflict, let's say, and they observe from a distance. again, whether it's a past experience or a desired future experience, this separation, this sense that they are leaving their body, they're leaving their mind, they're going to another place in their heads. Psychological management. Now, when we start that process, we move from talking about the past or the future, and then as they do what they're being invited to do, we move to the present tense. In other words, as they move into the future, let's say, we're saying, well, I'll invite you in a moment to move into the future, into that scenario. We then shift the language. So now in this space, now in this scenario with Brian, let's say, and we keep with the present tense. So that's maintaining the tense. Not only that we're probably being quite soft in the voice, because we're going through a journey, through an experience. We don't want too many shocks and externalizations. We want really to keep a fairly bland, relatively monotone voice that is familiar and unshocking, inviting them to have experiences. And most of the time when we're doing that, we'll be sensing, listening, watching and sensing to see and to measure where they are in their states. Very useful to be practicing those three positions as a coach. Very useful to be experiencing it from the coachee situation as well, and to be managing those. And of course there's many other tools for checking and maintaining psychological states, but this is a good place to start if you haven't already been doing that. So thanks for listening.